Hey everyone, welcome to Vibe Dojo, and this is a conversation that we're going to have, and we're going to be talking about different tools. And these tools are tools that we work with on, on a daily basis almost, and some of the tools that we use for vibe coding. And so, really wanted to dive in and talk about what some of the pros and the cons are for some of the tools that we heavily use. And I'm going to welcome back Destery Hildenbrand in this conversation, and we're going to dive in because Destery, like you mentioned, or before we got on this call, that you use some different tools than I use as well. So welcome, Destry.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I think that just based on our conversations and then just seeing what you sort of present and stuff, I noticed that I'm using some stuff that you don't use on a regular basis, and vice versa. So I'm excited to get into it and talk a little bit about what we like and what we don't like about all of them.
Yeah. And this is really just an informal conversation. We have nothing specific planned. It's more these conversations are just to really just kind of hang out, talk about vibe coding, talk about what works, talk about kind of, as we go on, what we've seen, what we've learned, different things like that. And if people want to learn more, I'm just going to go ahead and share. They can actually go over to Vibe Dojo. So if you go to vibedojo.ninja, you can check out all previous blog posts. We also have courses out there available now, so you can check those out as well. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the tools. And I want to start out with like the tool you use on a common, like a day-to-day basis. It's like your go-to tool that you work with all the time. And especially if whether it's like creating something for Rise or Storyline, or if it's something that you're just creating an application that has nothing to do with e-learning, we can dive into a few of those tools. So let's start out with Destry. I want to have you just share your screen a little bit, or just give us an introduction of the first tool that you actually use the most common.
Yeah, I would say maybe it just makes me basic, right? But probably the tool I use the most that I'll share here real quick is that I just use ChatGPT, right? I use ChatGPT. I'm using I think 5.2 is the one I'm on. Using it in Canvas mode so that I can preview the different things that I'm building in real time, right? So I think that for me, this is the one that I've had the most success. I've been using it probably the longest, and I've seen it sort of grow and become a much more stable tool than it once was. And stability is one of those things that I really struggle with a lot of these more basic LLMs or just the traditional LLMs that we hear about all the time. In that they just sometimes they just start doing their own thing. I don't even know if they're hallucinating so much as they're just ignoring what I'm telling them to do. And ChatGPT seems to do that the least.
Yeah, they both. I mean, every tool that I've worked with, some will actually you ask it to do something, and then it does like something completely different. And luckily, some of the tools that I've been working with lately don't completely overwrite it. But when I was first starting, and I'd ask for like a simple little thing, it would completely override the application. So now I had a completely new application and everything. So yeah. And how do you
Yeah.
like? Have you worked with Codex? Because I know there's a Codex part of ChatGPT, and like, what's the difference between those two?
Yeah. So what I find with Codex, and I've used it a couple different times, right? So what's great about it is that, and very similar to a lot of the other LLMs that I've been using, like Claude and even Gemini, we can connect it to, I can connect it to my GitHub so that I can just kind of move back and forth. Very similar to just having like a lot of times when I code and do stuff, I'll use my GitHub for Windows or whatever, and I'll do everything here and just upload it that way. And it'll just keep everything in different iterations so that I can see exactly what's happening. I can see what branches I'm using. I can, make new branches, and then I can not overwrite certain things. So I've found that it helps me do that. Although I also have found that it's not quite as quick and not quite as easy to just get into for me for some reason. And maybe other people out there are having better luck with it. I don't know, but I find that sometimes when I get in there and I start kind of looking around and trying to do stuff, if I'm just in a hurry, it doesn't necessarily help me as much. I find that when I'm in a hurry, I just hop in, I pull up one of my projects inside of chat, over here just on the side. I just pull up one of my my side projects here, and it's already set up. It's already got the canvas going, and I can just kind of continue on with what I have. So I'm excited to explore things like Codex a little bit more, so I can get a little bit more fluid in it. But yeah, one of the biggest benefits is that it does connect to your GitHub or whatever repo that you're using, and then you can save stuff that way.
So for somebody who's a complete newbie to this, you may have said a few things that I actually want to call out because I think it'd be helpful. And that's really the point of this YouTube channel, right? One of them is GitHub. Like if you're an instructional designer, you're just starting out, you've never worked with any type of code whatsoever. Can you just kind of dive in? What is GitHub and some of the benefits to GitHub?
Sure. What's great about GitHub is that number one, it's free. So you can get in there and you can have a free account. Number two, it's essentially just an online repository of content, only it's specialized in that it helps you to hold and then preview different coding projects. So any HTML, any CSS, things of that nature. And it's a really, once you sort of get into it, once you get it saved, it allows you to, again, kind of store all of your projects there. One of the cool features about it as well is that you can create pages on your in your free GitHub repo for the different repositories. You can create separate repositories for each project, essentially just a folder for each project that you have. And then you can create an HTML page that you can then share so people can see your project in real time. And I actually use that feature a lot to test. I send that to clients so that they can test it on their end to make sure that it looks and feels the way they want it to look before we actually do anything. So I guess, I mean, if we break it down, it's essentially just an online storage system that has a few benefits to let you kind of preview stuff. I see a lot of people use it for their portfolios too.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge benefit. But also, just to add to that, one of the reasons why I do it is for version control. Just like we were talking about at the very beginning, is sometimes the AI will overwrite something, or it'll change something, or completely mess up the if you're working with like a backend or something like that, it'll completely mess it up, and all of a sudden you have this unworking version of your application. And if you're using GitHub, you're safe because you can actually just discard all of those changes and go back to the version. And so every time that I'm working with something, if I'm working with GitHub, if I'm working with or Claude or ChatGPT or Cursor or anything like that, I always use GitHub to be able to do that or to keep that version. And also it makes it just kind of to tie in a couple other benefits to GitHub is when I'm using something like Lovable, which is one of my favorite applications, you can tie it into GitHub to get the files from Lovable and then move those files to your own website as well. So I mean, there's some benefits to it. Some of these applications make it pretty easy to connect to a GitHub, but then you have that version control. You have the file sharing between these different applications. It's really kind of the key to make this work and to go back and forth between all of these different tools, I think.
I would agree. And I think a key point you just hit on at the end there was sharing. I can also share my GitHub links with other developers, other partners in a project, or other clients so that they have access to everything that we put inside of there too. So it's a really easy way to transfer in what can sometimes be larger files that way too.
Yeah, and one thing we don't think about that as instructional designers is we don't do a lot of that with Storyline, with like or Rise or anything like that. Now, they do now. There is a feature in Storyline that allows you through the review tool allows you to create like backups, which is very similar to GitHub. But I've been working with even Storyline and GitHub for years because I would take a Storyline file, put it into GitHub, and then all of a sudden I have versions where I can go back and you can revert back to different versions of your project through GitHub as well. So, I mean, it's extremely useful tool. So I'm glad you brought it up there. Now, since you shared your favorite one, or it's kind of the basic, your favorite basic one,
Yeah.
what I want to do is go ahead and share mine. I like ChatGPT, but honestly, as I've been creating this course, this vibe coding fundamentals course, one of my favorite ones has actually been Claude. And I'll share a couple reasons why here. So let me go ahead and share my screen. And Claude automatically, without having me to prompt to go into Canvas or even to add Canvas, anytime that it recognizes that it's an HTML file, it basically just pulls up the preview. So it pulls up this canvas, which is, I always forget to do that. I use the desktop version of ChatGPT, so there is not on that plus icon, there's not an option to preview in Canvas. You actually have to specify
Uh,
preview in Canvas, which is
yeah.
annoying. But with the Claude desktop version, I don't have to do that. So it just automatically takes me right into it. And there's a couple other things is Claude does a better job, in my opinion, with code. If I'm using something like Cursor or other applications that allow you to choose which model, so you can choose like if you're going to use ChatGPT, you can choose if you're going to use Claude and what version of Claude. I think like across the board, the Claude model just does a better and kind of a more secure job with, or I don't know, reliable job with code. And so this is just one game that I created for, I think, a YouTube video. And so I just prompted it with a couple of things and it took the initiative to like create lives and like a timer. So now you have a timer and it starts to make sounds as it starts to get towards the end here. And you have lives. If I get something wrong, I just lost a life. I also added like a pause function because if you get distracted, you want to be able to pause it, but you don't want to sit there and read the question. To me, just the graphics and everything that I created, I was just kind of blown away. In my vibe coding fundamentals course, I also talk about like I did a comparison. I took the same prompt and I put it in every single tool. And the prompt was basically to create a flip card interaction. And the first prompt that I did in ChatGPT, it did not flip around and show me the back. Like it flipped around, but it showed me like the reverse text of the front
Mhm.
text. And
Yep.
so, and I know I've seen videos of you being able to do that, right? And so just that initial prompt when I did it inside of Claude was perfect. So it's just things like that that I don't know. I've actually become really fond of Claude and the actual Claude application here lately. So wanted to at least show that a little bit, and that's been my favorite tool lately. So
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I really enjoy Claude. I've used it quite a bit. I got really into it. The thing that drives me nuts about Claude is that I run out of credits so fast.
oh
So like it got to a point where I couldn't wait for the cooldown anymore because I had stuff to do. So I think part of me probably sacrificed a little bit of that initial quality from Claude to go into ChatGPT and maybe strengthen my prompts a little bit to get more of what I need. So I don't disagree at all. I liked Claude. I used that to build a lot of my first games when I very first started vibe coding. But yeah, it was just it ate through credits like crazy. Or I would get like in a zone and just be like, okay, we're doing this, we're doing that. And then all of a sudden, even with the paid version that I had, right? The basic paid version, whatever it was, 20 bucks a month. It would always just like trip me up. And then I'm like, well, I don't want to wait 6 hours. And then I got a limit for my day. I got a limit for my hours. I got a limit for my week. And ChatGPT gave me unlimited for the money I was paying.
wow, yeah, that's huge actually. So if you can just work around the prompts, that's a good point to be able to use ChatGPT on that. And have you tried this thought that just occurred to me? Have you tried taking what like you built in Claude and then putting it into ChatGPT? Like if
Yeah,
it can
I
do
will actually I'll do it vice versa. I will start building in ChatGPT and then I'll put it into Claude, tweak a little bit, and then I'll bring it back. So I have no problem jumping back and forth sometimes, especially if I'm trying to do something that I know Claude has done for me in the past, but ChatGPT just isn't quite hitting the mark. So I'll pull the code from ChatGPT into Claude. I'll clean it up and do some different things in Claude, and then I'll bring it back into ChatGPT and say, don't mess with this. We're going to use this as our new base.
So are there other tools besides like ChatGPT and Claude that you've played around with? And what are some of your other favorite ones here?
I think that I have a love-hate relationship with Gemini, Google's Gemini. I find that one of the challenges that I have with Gemini is that it does do a really, really good job of creating what it is that I'm looking for. And I'll share here just real quick. But when it gets lost, it gets so lost, right? Like you were saying before, sometimes you would have it where it would overwrite everything. Well, this is one where if you don't hook it up to like a GitHub or some other repository of some kind, and you're not saving along the way, you're not saving those versions, it just all of a sudden is like I've decided to change absolutely everything, and I don't remember anything from the past. So I've had many a nights where I've had to hold back telling Gemini exactly how I felt about it in the moment.
You had some therapy sessions you wanted to like
I
work through,
did.
right?
I did. But boy, sometimes when it starts though, it does such a good job. And it's like any program I use. I always get so into it that I forget, like you forget to save. All of a sudden something crashes, like you're in Premiere, and all of a sudden it like freezes up and you're like, when did I save last? When was the last time I saved this
Yeah.
project? I don't even know. So I do that. I do that sometimes just because of how I just forget when I get in there. So like this,
Can you,
the one that I'm sharing
yeah, I
here is the
was going
security
to say, go
protocol.
ahead and just jump in. I want to see some of
Yeah,
this. Yeah.
so this is the one that I had done, and I fought with it. Like if you see here, like I fought with it to go back and give me everything because this is what it ended up giving me, right? In the whole thing. And it's fine. It's not bad. But when I jump back over here into ChatGPT, this is what we started with. This is the piece that we started with inside of there. And of course, in this moment, it's not going to work. I'm going to have to check and see why it's broken now. But this is the one that I had in there.
All right, so we had to pause there for a second because the for some reason, and this is the what happens with AI, is Destry's code inside of ChatGPT just stopped working. So he's trying to get that to fix so we can see the comparison of Gemini and ChatGPT because I think it's very useful that way. But what I wanted to do is dive in and kind of talk about another one of my favorite tools, and this one is not, I'm saving one of them for the last one that I want to talk about. But this one is actually one of my favorite kind of dive a little deeper tools. And it allows you to target what model that you're actually using as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And let me pull this up. And this is Cursor. So Cursor is a desktop application. So it is an application similar to Visual Studio Code, if you're going to be working with Visual Studio Code, or similar to Sublime Text or something like that, which initially makes people very nervous. But there's some different things and some different modes that you can do with Cursor where you don't even have to look at the code. Similar to ChatGPT, similar to Claude, you don't need to even go in there and specifically do it. But if you do know code, it actually is, in my opinion, more robust, and it allows you to have greater flexibility in the tool and even tie into things like databases. As I was going through the Vibe Coding Fundamentals course, I realized that there were some things that Claude and ChatGPT both couldn't do. Like I wanted to use default images from Pexels, for example, and I wanted to pull in. But inside of the Claude application and ChatGPT, it just shows a broken image until I actually export out the HTML. But with something like Cursor, I don't run into that issue. It can pull in external images from Pexels from other places without that concept here. So here is just a preview of Cursor, and this is actually in what's called agent mode. And agent mode allows you to not look at the code, even though it will actually tell you the code. It doesn't, you specifically don't have to even pay attention to, but you're just in this chat mode down at the bottom, down just like you would be with Claude or ChatGPT as well. And you can pull up a browser that you can see all of your content just down at the bottom, and you can navigate to the different content. You can pull in images from, like I mentioned, Pexels or other things, or from YouTube, and you can have all of that and make it interactive, similar to what you could inside of ChatGPT and Claude. But if you actually go down to this mode down here, this is where it allows you to target specific models. So I could actually target Claude. I can have it Opus 4.5 or Sonnet 4.5. I can use ChatGPT Codex. I can use ChatGPT just regular. I can use Gemini as well. So it kind of like brings all of these different models together. However, you can run out, similar to what Destry was talking about, you can run out of credits and you can basically just be stuck in that way. But if you ever do, what I typically do is I use Claude because I like the coding model better, but then I just turn on auto. And if I turn on auto, it kind of balances out the credits and it will use some ChatGPT free credits. It'll use some Gemini credits. It'll kind of balance it out automatically depending on the task that you're actually using. So if you're doing some intense work, what I would say is make sure that you for sure use Claude. But if you're doing some things that it just simple little tweaks or simple little changes or something like that, why not use something like the auto where it just automatically picks some of the free credits and stuff like that? So have you had a chance to use Cursor, Destry? I'm curious.
I did jump into Cursor. I watched a couple of your videos, and I jumped
Okay.
into Lovable and Cursor, and I like them both. I really do. I have not bit the bullet though yet, and paid for a subscription, so I run out of credits pretty quick there too.
Awesome.
You were talking about those. There's another one that I tried too called Base 44. Have you ever tried that one?
I have. Yeah. So I do explore with that prompt. I do explore the same prompt and inside of base 44. And I actually was very impressed with it. So it's very similar to Lovable, where you can create the full application and replets and other things. But out of all of those kind of online applications, I found that Lovable and base 44 were actually some of my favorite.
Yeah, I really liked Base 44. I was using it to build a 360 like web app. Like so I could, show equirectangular images, 360-degree images and stuff. So I could just do that. And it got me pretty close. I ran out of credits and I haven't gone back yet, but it was really easy to do. Because I think that you have a much more extensive knowledge of some of the behind the scenes stuff than I do, and it was nice to not have to think about that as much when I was starting with it. Obviously, something I would have to look at a little bit later, but not having to worry about tell it to do a database and it just does it, things like
Yeah.
that. So
And there's different levels of like coding. If you're just wanting to get like a vibe code thing for Rise or Storyline, ChatGPT, Claude, perfect. If you're wanting to create something that's a little bit more complex that has different files and better structure, because with Claude and Story or ChatGPT, it puts it inside of one HTML file, but with stuff like ChatGPT or Cursor, it allows you to have multiple files. But then there's like the different level of vibe coding tools like Lovable or Base 44 or Bolt and different things where and the benefit to those is they handle a lot of this database back and forth. So I don't have to worry about what a database is, how to actually save it. All I have to do is basically say, I want this to be a user login. I want them to log in. I want them to have projects that are saved to their user. Those are things that I cover in my course, but it is things that are important, those concepts, if you wanted to build like full applications where your organization is taking advantage of like actual things that you can upload and create and download and different things like that. So I don't know if you had a chance to get your application working here.
it hates me today. I don't know what's going on.
That
I
that'll
don't
be
know.
a that'll be a follow-up one. So we'll come back to that one.
All right. Uh,
And that's the thing with this world of AI is sometimes these applications work great. Sometimes, you're going to struggle with it a little bit back and forth. And there's really those two different modes that I like to think about. And the first mode is implementing. You're implementing a new feature. You're talking, okay, specifically about something that you want to add to your application. And the other one is just debugging. So in this case, Destry is in debugging where he's like trying to figure something out, going back and forth, and something isn't working there. So that's kind of those two modes I know we talked about in our first conversation, but that's just a good example of that. So,
I absolutely. What's fun is that the more videos we do like this, and the more things happen to us in real time, the more we'll know what other videos to do later
yeah,
to
yep,
show how these things work and what we do to combat these different situations. So
yep. Do you have something else, like a different tool that you want to show, or you want me to dive into another one?
You know what? Why don't you go ahead and dive into another one? Like I said, I keep it pretty simple. I think between ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini, that's where I do the most damage that I have. That's where I do all of the things that I've put together so far.
Yeah.
I've toyed around a little bit with some of those other ones, but I think that you have a little bit more, practical application with some of those other tools.
Yeah, and one thing that I haven't, you have more experience with is the Gemini one. So being able to work with, I've never really used Gemini except for just very short little snippets and stuff. So I was interested to hear that. But let me dive into another application here, and this application is actually called Lovable, and we talked about it a little bit last week. But this is actually compared to Base 44, like you were talking about. It's a very similar tool, and I've used other tools like Replit. I've used tools like Bolt as well. And Replit, I do want to circle back with because now they have the ability to create mobile applications, like full mobile applications. But I have built over like I think 10 different apps inside of Lovable. So that has been like one of my favorite tools here. And I'll just show it a little bit where you can, when you come into Lovable, it initially starts you out with a prompt. And now you can pay if you wanted to get a little bit more credits, which you'll quickly run out of the free credits. And so you could try it out. But if you want to pay a little bit more, I think it's about $20 a month, which actually that's a good point. How hard is it? Because you don't have as much experience in other applications. Like I'm finding almost like subscription fatigue with all of these different, because like almost all of them are like $20 a month, right? So
Yeah, they are. And I have to decide where my $20 is going to go. And like I said, with Claude, it was $20. ChatGPT was $20. Gemini, I had a subscription from my hosting, right, for my LLC. So I was already paying for two of them. I didn't necessarily need to pay for three. And that's where I kind of have been jumping around a little bit because, like you said, the subscription fatigue is one of those things that I talk with a lot of folks that they're showing all these really cool things and these really cool programs, these really cool AI and enhanced spaces. But I have to just guess that they're paying hundreds of dollars a month, thousands of dollars a year, and that's just not sustainable for everybody on an L&D salary all the time.
yeah, especially if you're just trying, you're a single person just trying to create an application for your organization, and you're going back and forth and you're trying to iterate a lot on something, you're going to run out of credits. And I think the initial for Lovable, for example, is about $20, but you get about 200 credits, which I can easily burn through 200 credits. I'm like, especially when you're going back and forth on these applications. And so that's why to me, it's like you kind of have to pick and choose. What I would say is, play around with all of them, play around with what they can do. Try all of them, have like a sample, a trial of about 5 credits per day. And then just see what you like and then just embrace it because a lot of the concepts that you learn, well, you can do in any application. They're all very similar as far as across the board here. But let me dive back into Lovable here, and these are different full applications that I've been building on this one. So whenever I'm going to build something like I want the learner to or the user to be able to create a project and save the project and come back to that project with their user, I use Lovable. But I also teach my students in my class how to use Lovable for their portfolio. So they can come in and create a complete portfolio without having to know any code. So Lovable is great for just like creating a website and just creating something that you don't even know how to host it or anything like that. Lovable is great for something like that. But it really, you can dive into it and you can get these full applications and get more robust services without having to know all the specifics here. One of the ones that I created for as a free tool is called the GSAP Studio. Now, in this GSAP Studio, you basically can go in and it has a login. So I go in and log into my account here. And one of the reasons why I wanted a login was so that people can create these custom animations and save them and come back to them and quickly copy and paste the code into other storyline files. And so that was one of the reasons why I used Lovable. But inside of here in Lovable, we create a full Like I can come down and create a snippet. And when I create a snippet, this is where I can copy in the ID, the variable name. And as I start to type things in here, you'll see that the code starts to update. So with my other channel, Learning Dojo, essentially what I like to do is show people how to customize code, customize storyline. And so these tools were a way for me to create these, make it easier for people to create these JavaScript snippets so they didn't need to know JavaScript essentially. And so Lovable kind of met the need for that to be able to create this application. So I had to focus on one feature at a time. And so when I was going there and say, okay, I want to be able to create a project, but in that project, I want to have all these GSAP properties, and I want to have them in a different tab interaction or a tab where they can update these properties, and then it updates the code. So I'm going back and I'm focusing on one feature at a time to be able to do that. And so it does take a lot more to be able to do. And like I mentioned, you can easily burn through some of your credits. But one more thing that I'm kind of currently working on that I just want to show of what Lovable can do is this certificate generator. And this certificate generator is, and I'll kind of give the context and of why I created it, is I use right now for my courses, I use a platform called Circle. Circle does not have a way to be able to generate a certificate at the end of it. So I wanted to create a certificate generator for anyone that needed a certificate. And so then I thought, oh, well, why don't I just vibe code this and open it up to other people? And that's really where this certificate generator came into play, is I can come down and choose from different designs, which the AI created the designs for me, which was pretty cool. And I can choose from different designs and I can say, hey, Joe Schmo just completed JavaScript and storyline. And then I could put the date, completion date, who the instructor was, and then I can click on generate certificate. Now what I can do from there is just give Joe Schmo this link right here, just copy the link. And then when Joe Schmo pulls that link up, it has the certificate that they can download the image, they can download the PDF. And then I took it a step further. I'm like, oh, what if we, because one of the additional things that I always hear is like, well, I work in storyline and it doesn't really have a certificate and I want to be able to generate a certificate from a storyline course. Can I do that? So what I did here is I set up, let me share my screen again, is I set up this code snippet. So now if you just create these two variables inside a storyline and you just copy this code, which is long, and I'll explain why it's long, you just copy the code, place it inside of an execute JavaScript trigger inside of storyline, it pulls up that same URL, but it pulls it up with whoever the username is inside of the storyline course. So you have to do that and just update the variable there. And the reason why the code is so long is just so it encrypts it a little bit and it doesn't allow the user to change the username and password and stuff like that. That's to me, and Destry, I don't know if this is the same with you, but just like finding those different problems that you have within your organization. This goes back to the first conversation that we ever had. Finding those problems and then using vibe coding to create solutions, whether they're just simple interactions inside of a learning course or whether they're a full application that other people in your organization could use and take advantage of, so they don't have to be experts in code or so they can create certificates. One of the other examples that's coming to mind is Mel Milloway just posted on LinkedIn. She does a lot of vibe coding. She just posted her team does a lot of like video title creation. And so she just vibe coded the ability to type out text and then it downloads After Effects video. And I was like, see, she's solved a problem, or she saw a problem. She solved the problem with this vibe coding. And now she has this solution for her entire team to be able to create something quickly. So I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, no, I can share here real quick too. So one of the things when I was building a course not too long ago was all about trying to take advantage of the code block in Rise. So similar to how you're pulling everything into Storyline using the JavaScript, one of the challenges is always that Rise is fantastic, but it's limited a little bit into some of the things you can do. So what I did is kind of went in and was able to vibe code a couple different solutions that we could put into blocks for each of the sections to enhance sort of what's going on. Now, the first thing here you'll see is that we've got sort of like we've got kind of a dynamic background. It sort of has like it's pulsating, it's kind of doing stuff. One of the challenges I always find working in Rise is that there's a lot of east-west space that's never used. All right, there's a lot of stuff on the sides that I don't quite have anything to put in there necessarily. So being able to kind of code it in that way so that we can put it there. But then again, just some different types of interactions. So there's a lot of interactions in there already. But this one was essentially a pick and choose game, right? So it was like pick the right answer. So here's your scenario. Here's the actual, and like you mentioned earlier too, Claude doesn't let you put images in here. It just shows a broken image link, but you have an image of the individual that's there. You've got the little scenario, and then you have to choose which one of these scenarios actually makes the most sense inside of there. So that was a really cool one to kind of put together. So that it was like, hey, we learned about this thing, and then we wanted to do something really interactive, and I didn't have time to get into storyline and build something crazy interactive there. So I just vibe coded this right here in Claude. And then I'll scroll down here just a little bit more, and I'll pull up another one that I did here. This is before I started using multiple projects or multiple chats to do it. I was doing everything in one for a
All in
long
the
time
same
because I
one.
was like, oh, I'm on it. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
But again, just sort of an enhanced accordion view, right? Here was something, but being able to customize it again in a way, right? Whether they wanted the dark green with the circles or the light, the white with the light green circles, but being able to customize not only an accordion, but then, making it sort of dynamic. So it has these little elements that, make it kind of work. One other one I'll share here that again was just sort of one of those another piece again that I just put together inside of Claude and then used as a code block was this one here, just an enhanced flip card kind of thing going
That's
on.
cool.
And then and then we were able to actually take the flip cards, but then turn it into a carousel of multiple things too. So if you wanted to do more than that, so yeah, just and again, these aren't necessarily super crazy complex things, but it's a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more interesting, and it gave me a little more control over the design, the style, the look and feel, all of those different things. And if you go like if you just take a look at the code here, oops, sorry. Look at the code. This is that all-in-one code that you were talking about before. You once you get it set, you copy this, you drop it into code block, and it should work. You have to be careful sometimes. Code block's a little bit of a sandbox environment, which just means that it doesn't do all of the things like a typical JavaScript, HTML, CSS site might do on a regular hosted website. Inside of code block, there are some limits in there sometimes, but you can copy this out. One thing I did want to point out too is that you mentioned that like Lovable, Replit, those they will divide out your sections, your different files, right? So typically there's three different sections. There's an HTML, there's a CSS, which is the style of what's going on, and then the JavaScript, which makes it do all the things. Typically in a website, you'll have those all as three separate files. A lot of times I'll get to the end and be like, hey, can you divide this out into those three files for me? Just so that I can have more control and it's easier to adjust later on. So
Yeah.
Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT will all do that when you ask it to, and it sets it up so that it'll all connect in the end. So
Perfect. Yeah. And that's really, it's what problem do you have? Look within your
mhm.
organization. Are you needing to create like just a custom code block? Does the Rise blocks not meet the need? If they do, then great, just use those. But if they don't meet the need, then you can use vibe coding to help solve the solution or solve the problem. Or if there is a full application that you do need to create, then that's when you need to dive into other applications similar to Lovable or similar to Cursor or other things like that. But that's where, to me, at least within the last year that I've been using vibe coding, and it has been solving, like whenever a problem comes up, I usually go to vibe code and I say, how can I solve this? And I've just been doing this in my personal life too. Actually, there's ways to vibe code iOS applications. So I just go create an iOS application. I created one that, Destry and I are huge Disney nerds. And my family's a Disney nerd, or Disney nerds. And so we basically count down the days until we go to a Disney trip. And so I created a countdown of like when our next trip is. And so at any point I can pull up the app and say, we got 90 days, we got 30 days, things like that. So it's that. And I think that's the mind shift that we need to get in this industry, is not necessarily is AI taking our job, but like, how can we solve the problems that we had before with AI, with vibe coding and different things like that. So, all right. So
Yeah.
I think we've talked a lot. I'll let you kind of like put in your final thoughts here, and then we'll wrap it up here.
All right, sounds good. I'll just show you one thing here real quick. In Gemini, I used it to create a vibe master deck. So like an idea deck for vibe coding projects for an instructional designer. So I had it divided into 4 different potential categories. And then I used some sort of
Oh,
dynamic
that's cool.
CSS to do some kind of neat functions in there. And one of the cool things with this is that I went and found like some websites that I really liked what they were doing. And I used it as reference and I said, hey, can you replicate this particular function in there? And then we kind of worked through what that looked like. But yeah, so there's 7, there's like 7 different options in this first one. In the system, section, there's 4 or 5 of them. So I was inspired by, there was an idea deck for instructional design, ways to apply instructional design. I think it was Torrance Learning that had it, that I got one year, and I was like, oh, that'd be really cool for like a vibe deck idea. But yeah, that was a really cool project, and it did great on this one. Like it didn't break or anything. And then just real quick, I'll show you what I was talking about earlier. Here was the security app, right? So this is the one that it came up with. This is what it looked like, and again, it's not terrible, right? It's okay, but I'll show you, this is what I gave it to start with, right? So we got a power button, we got the loading, we've got some dynamic, hey, what are we doing here? Let's do our first scenario, right? So it sort of took away a lot of the function from it. It started off okay, but then it just kept slowly breaking it down to much simpler interactions. So I don't know, 100% no. Maybe it was a prompt thing on my end, or maybe you know, the AI, whoever's watching that wasn't helping me out that day or whatever. So yeah, but no, I think
The
that
AI deity is what you're trying to get at.
exactly. I didn't do what I needed to do that day to appease them.
That's
No,
a
just to
whole
kind of
nother
wrap up.
conversation that we're not going to go down. We don't have enough time for that today.
Exactly. But yeah, just to kind of wrap up, I think that sort of what you had brought up earlier and what we've kind of talked about is, I think the biggest thing is, don't get too lost in the tools necessarily. I think it's really easy to get overwhelmed, especially now, because there's so many tools out there, and all of them work very similar. They have little tweaks and stuff like that. But if you have something, even if you have just something like Copilot or ChatGPT, and you already have a subscription, you can get started there. So don't feel like you have to invest a ton of money other places until you decide exactly how far into this you want to get. But just start building stuff, just start trying, just start doing. And then as you run into limitations, you can start looking for tools that help you get past them.
Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to, is you don't need to be the one, or you don't need to subscribe to everything. You just go in and you play around with the free trials of everything, see which one kind of speaks to you that your work can work with, and you find that it's outputting good. And then just dive into that one a little bit more and use that one to create these different applications, or just these interactions and so forth. But I also think if you're just creating for like Rise or Storyline, Claude and ChatGPT, you probably don't need to dive into Cursor. You probably don't need to dive into Lovable. You can probably stick with Claude and ChatGPT to create all of those different ones. So, and I think it's a little easier because it keeps the HTML to a single HTML, which is exactly what you can do to copy and paste it in. But yeah, so that is pretty much what we wanted to talk about today. We, as you can tell, we went over the 30 minutes, and so we have a lot to talk about, and we'll keep talking about it. But what I want to do is open it up to you. Like, what else? What other conversations? What questions do you have that you want to have us talk about? Or if there's other people that you want us to bring into these conversations as well, feel free to recommend those people. I know there's some that I would love to have a conversation with as well that we'll reach out to. Destry and I are going to different conferences, so we're talking about also doing some of our conversations on the road and together, and maybe even bring in some other some other voices in the industry as well during those conversations. So we have a lot planned. Since our first conversation, we've grown to already 7,000 subscribers, which has been amazing. We're close to actually 8,000 at this point, so that's been mind-blowing. So don't forget to go ahead and like and subscribe. That helps our channel, allows us to continue to produce this content and to get these videos out for you as well. And then also our weekly blogs. Destry's been doing a few on his own. I've been doing a few on my own as well. So make sure that you like and subscribe to those as well. But also one more thing, let me go ahead and show you on our website. We do have our courses, our full courses, which this is only the beginning. We have more courses that are going to be coming. We have vibe coding fundamentals. We have the AI assistant, which also includes other vibe coding tools for Storyline. We'll probably have one in Rise, vibe coding for Rise, but also JavaScript for Storyline, which uses AI development tools. And then also you can check out all of our previous blog posts by clicking on blog posts and check that out there as well. But that's it. That's all that we wanted to talk about today. Thanks for checking out this video. And Destry, any other final words?
No, just start vibing, have a good time, and yeah, just keep coming back, and we'll keep chatting about stuff.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.